Okay, well, I'd just like to welcome everybody. Just as a reminder, we are recording this session, so if you would like to get access to this after the fact and go over this information again, we will be posting that on the team site for IAMCP, as well as distributing the deck once we receive it from HCL. So just wanted to make sure that you knew that in advance. And with that, I'd like to welcome our special guest today, HCL. They are a quarterly partner briefing sponsor in February. They joined us as a global sponsor then, and they are continuing to offer services to the IAMCP community. And with that, they're going to talk today about a special IP product that they have. And I'm going to turn it over to Dennis Helms, Solution Architect, Enterprise AI Products, to show you what it's all about. Dennis, take it away.
Awesome, man. Appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. Good morning, afternoon, wherever you're at. So yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit today about using artificial intelligence and machine learning to reduce client support costs. And we have a product that I'll talk a little bit about. Just a brief moment about me. I joined HCL about a year ago. I'm the Global Solutions Architect for Enterprise AI Products in the ERX group. Many of you might know HCL for its services and being an SI, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. I have a pretty deep background in AI. I come from a programming background, so I'll probably age myself when I say this, but I used to be a C++ programmer back in the day. And then C# and enterprise architecture and kind of the whole 9 yards. So that's kind of my background, and I'll jump in here and talk a little bit about HCL. So, like I mentioned before, you probably know us from our IT and business services area. That is still our largest business at about US 7.1 billion in revenue, and is our oldest business. We've been around for 30 some odd years. We also have engineering and R&D services, and that really focuses mostly on product development for customers, and that represents our second largest revenue chunk. And then thirdly, our products and platforms, and that's kind of where the ERX group sits. That's where I sit, and we're an emerging group within HCL, and already we've exceeded $1 billion in revenue, and we have a significant number of products. A lot of these products, including the one that I'm going to talk about today, was actually derived by us developing out of need. So this particular product was actually derived because we had a couple of large customers that we were actually doing outsourcing, their help desk and their service desk. We were acting as the MSP, and we needed to be able to increase margins and increase customer satisfaction and meet SLAs that were, contractual. So we actually went through and developed the software internally and started using it, and then eventually we productized it. So that's kind of a little bit of the origin story. So some of the things that we definitely noticed and have experienced, and I'm sure you all have, is some of the support challenges in customer service. From the support technician's perspective, they're seeing the same thing over and over again. It's like Groundhog Day. And for the one or two Z's that come up where they don't know the answer to it, they're trying to figure out who has the expertise, who do I talk to, how do I escalate this. From the customer's perspective, that's also problematic because it can get escalated several times before it actually gets answered. The call gets lengthy. You're wasting a lot of people's time. I mean, you guys know the drill. From a service manager's perspective, we're trying to be proactive, and this is where the kind of proactive stance comes. And it's like, well, okay, if they're suffering from this or that or the other potential issue, what else might they be dealing with that we can solve proactively? And again, how do I best apply the resources and the knowledge that I have, which in often cases is in people's head, back into the service process in order to best serve the customers and reduce costs and all of that. And then finally, from the executive's perspective, it definitely comes down to cost and margins. MSPs are generally, at least from the service desk side, it tends to be a thinner margin business. So any advantages that are awarded there definitely can help things like improving CSAT scores and MTTRs and that kind of thing. So, and of course, nobody wants to replace staff, and then again, nobody also wants to increase headcount just in order to meet need. They'd like to use their staff that they have efficiently and invest more deeply in the staff, and kind of reduce turnover rates. So, those are some of the issues that we see. And what we'd like to do with our product is we'd like to start kind of shifting that over from what we talked about on the left over to what we're looking at on the right. And so it breaks down to these issues like handling high call volumes, spikes in call volumes. An outage happens, there's spikes. If you're servicing, a customer in an HR capacity, during things like open enrollment, it spikes, or recruitment, it spikes. So trying to flatten those hills and valleys and make it a little bit more predictable. Reactive problem solving, again, not really knowing what the problem is until the problem surfaces, and then trying to scramble to figure out what it is to reduce the MTTR. Long issue resolution times, ineffective use of service agents. And then what I mean by ineffective use of service agents is if I've got 20 agents or 50 agents and I've got groups of them that specialize in certain things, a lot of times I'll have 4 or 5 agents just receiving the calls and making sure that the ticket data is sound, and then routing it along. Whether you call them customer service managers or whatnot, but it's an extra layer or level 0, if you will, in the help desk structure. And so those agents could be actually, solving real problems rather than dealing with the quality of the ticket data. That's something that AI can definitely assist with. And then, of course, dependency on tribal knowledge, which I mentioned. So a couple of ways we're going to tackle that is definitely through conversational AI, enabling the customer to do some self-service. And I know that chatbots in service situations are kind of par for the course nowadays. I'm going to show you how we're a little bit different, because it's not all about the conversational AI, but that is definitely an element of it. Prediction of potential issues, getting instant access to information, wherever that information might be, where it exists, queuing assignments to get the right tickets queued to the right agents when need be, and then having AI-driven insights at the end of all this to be able to make sense of how it's impacting the environment. So this product is called IntelliService. And it was really built, this is one of the key differentiators here, is it was really built for the multi-hybrid and cloud enterprise environment. And what I mean by that is best of breed solutioning in terms of what companies are using nowadays to do this type of work. So it used to be back in the day, you're a Microsoft shop. Okay, great. Everything I have is going to be Microsoft. And we're using the Microsoft stack for absolutely everything. And that's not the case now. Microsoft's still involved, obviously, but someone might use Workday for HR. They might use SAP for invoicing and financials. They might use, and it's really just comes down to best of breed. In a lot of cases, it's those departments or divisions that are choosing what software they use, and IT has to support that. And so in doing so, you get a lot of what I'll call siloed solutions. So for instance, just with ServiceNow, if you select the highest tier in ServiceNow as a subscriber, then you do get a chatbot. But the chatbot that you get, the intents and the things that it can solve and the use cases that it's geared toward is obviously all toward ServiceNow. It's not going to necessarily reach across and integrate with a bunch of other things and give you that kind of global view. So that's a big differentiator for us. We were really kind of tailored and created to actually go through and exist in that type of environment. And so a couple of the things that we'll be doing directly with this platform and the goals of it are reducing call and ticket volume. I mentioned MTTRs and CSAT scores, and improve agent productivity, but it all comes down really to the cost per ticket. And right now, U.S. average cost per ticket is about $62 per ticket, fully loaded. That's cost of your agents, your software, your KLO activities, and whatnot. And so, what we're looking to do is actually directly affect that number and bring that number down. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later when we talk about our pricing. So some of the key features here as well, and I've gone over a couple of these things, but this goes in a little bit deeper. I'll start with the ticket classification in the upper right-hand corner. So we intimately integrate with whatever ticketing system is being used. And so no matter what channel that ticket comes in on, whether it comes in via email or whether it comes in, obviously if it comes in with the chatbot, we're dealing it, forward and directly, but it might come in, from someone calling the help desk line or even SMS chat or something like that, or someone sending an email directly to a service agent that they just have a relationship with that they've, talked to before. So when tickets are updated, changed, whatnot, we actually have a ticket manager component that sits alongside of whatever the ticketing system is, and we talk directly to that. So we can see across all of the tickets, and we can actually act proactively from that perspective as well. So for instance, if there is an issue that we know that we can solve very easily, something like, let's say, resetting a password, and someone creates a ticket and they did it through a channel that that the bot does not necessarily have visibility to initially, then the bot can see that ticket created. It can actually pick up that ticket, send the user an email, let them click on a link, it goes to the chatbot, and then they can actually work through that with them. So that's pretty neat in terms of being proactive. Then there's obviously the Conversational AI Agent piece, which is really more of the interface. I like to call it a CUI as opposed to a GUI, Conversational User Interface, as opposed to Graphical User Interface, because you're using chat channels and things like that in order to interface with it. The duplicate ticket identification and similar ticket identification, and that really, I mentioned flattening those peaks and valleys. If you imagine you have an outage and you start getting all sorts of calls coming in because of that outage, and the AI can actually go through, pick that up, and start responding to that and letting people know that that there's actually an issue. It can add them, let's say in ServiceNow, it can go through and add them to the ticket notifications. So when the master ticket is updated or changed or fixed, everyone gets notice that the ticket's been completed and is done. So it also decreases ticket volume, which is nice because it doesn't, it helps eliminate some mounds of data and clean up and stuff like that. So it has that learning capability automatically. Deals with unstructured data analysis as well. So this goes through some of the core stuff where, a lot of companies that do this, they have the chatbot. They say, oh well, the fact that we have natural language recognition or NLP is, that's the AI part of it. Well, this definitely goes multiple steps deeper than that in terms of pattern recognition, in terms of figuring things out ahead of time, predictive analysis, and providing reporting and stuff like that goes above and beyond that's been scrubbed by the AI. So this is really kind of what that speaks to, is patterns of events, errors, messages, and things like that. So you have an outage that seems to happen at the same time every month or every quarter or every week or something like that. This can pick up on that, where someone might not have, and pick up these kind of patterns and connect issues and potential things, and then be able to present that back to the agent or to a senior agent to look into for proactive fixing. Smart ticket assignment, and I mentioned about that. That's really going through, leveraging the NLP to go through all of the ticket data, regardless, again, how it was entered, and be able to go through and kind of classify that and figure out what the problem is. And that's classic intent recognition with NLP. But by doing that, we can go through and we can pick from an attribute that ticket to say, well, this is, deals with this particular system. It's maybe this particular customer or whatever, and be able to tag those things, so it can better be routed and B, provide a little bit of insight or heads up for the agent that's going to be dealing with that. And then finally, resolution recommendations, and that's really kind of a big one. And that's again a heavy use AI condition, where we're actually going through and not just going through and doing some matching on articles or Q&A, kind of like Q&A Maker does if you're familiar with Microsoft's Q&A Maker, but this actually goes a little bit deeper. So deep to the point we actually are leveraging this for product management. And I'll kind of diverge on a little point here around that just to kind of give you an idea. We actually have with several companies we're working with for product management, or we're going through and reducing their field service calls by basically taking all the data as well as all of the resolution data and all of the data that that their field service reps go in and enter after they've gone through and fixed, in this particular company that I'm talking about, it's an appliance company, after they've gone through and fixed the appliance, and be able to actually pull all that forward and create a set of questions that allows for an agent to go through and ask, questions to the customer while they have them on the phone to try to better diagnose the problem while they have them on the phone, rather than sending out a field service agent to diagnose that issue. I heard some background noise. Was there a question? Okay, I'll continue on. So that's what we're talking about in terms of resolution recommendations. It's really very, very smart feature and leverages AI in much more of a smart way, as opposed to just doing enterprise search or cognitive search. Cognitive search is a part of it, of course, but that's above and beyond. So basically in this diagram here, we sit in the center and we interface obviously with support agents, with customers, and to do customer self-service. We interface with any kind of services that sit outside in public cloud, on-premise or private cloud. We can exist also on-premise. I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then, of course, we've got on the right-hand side all these different platforms that we integrate with. And we have a great connector framework. So it takes us very, very little time to put a connector together if we don't already have it, to be able to pull that data in and be able to make use of it. So that's the sources on the right. So when we talk about what IntelliService is comprised of, it really kind of stands on four legs of the stool, or four pillars, if you will. Cognitive search is a deep portion of that. Allows for agents to get at information very, very quickly. And the conversational AI, of course, we talked about that pretty in depth. Augmented analytics, and that's really predictive analytics. But in addition to that, a lot of other factors that are brought in, and all of these pieces are talking to each other, by the way, as well. So conversational AI can leverage automatic or augmented analytics, or the results of augmented analytics, to be able to better help the customer, or can leverage cognitive search if it's trying to find an answer that isn't readily available. And then finally RPA, and that RPA is kind of an interesting one, because we leverage it in very certain scenarios where we need to do something, quite honestly, that RPA is good for. So mass data entry, mass data pulling, screen scraping, database browsing, website browsing. It's the things of that nature where we need to pull data back or do kind of mass entries or mass changes or things like that. So there are conditions where it does need to be used, and it's the best tool for the job. So these really are the kind of four pillars in our tools in our toolbox, if you will. In terms of where we play, you obviously have, as an extension of service teams, we've been talking a little bit about standard IT help desk, but really and truthfully, this exists finance and HR and sales, operations, facilities, ITSM. It exists in all these places. So any place, and I mentioned even product management as well, and field service management. So that's another area of extension that could be easily leveraged and used. And really, all these things can exist, all these conditions could exist in any of the given verticals that are down below. So really and truthfully, it's a pretty broad-based platform. It wasn't, I mean, it was obviously born into itself within us servicing a manufacturing client, actually, a printer manufacturing client. That's where it was kind of born. But we've since deployed it in insurance. We've deployed it in healthcare, in healthcare manufacturing as well. Some medical device practices, as well as FinServe. So it really can exist in multiple places quite successfully. I mentioned earlier that we can exist anywhere. Everything that we do is containerized, so we can deploy that anywhere. I imagine that a lot of you probably are leveraging Azure, which is, obviously a core competency for us, but we can also deploy it anywhere in public cloud, private cloud, as well as on-premise. And you'd be surprised, there's actually a lot of customers, especially that, maybe old Lotus customers that are leveraging stuff on-prem, SAP customers that are still leveraging a lot of stuff on-prem, FinServe and state and local government, as well as defense, all areas that are a little bit slow for adoption, as you probably know. And so the fact that we can exist on-premise really kind of eliminates a good 60 to 70% of a lot of the SaaS platforms that are out there that might claim to do what we do. So that's a big differentiator right off the bat. I want to go over a couple of case studies. I'm going to take a quick break to see if any of you have any questions on the technical aspect of things, in terms of the solution or my thoughts on anything regarding service and reducing costs or anything like that. So if you have any questions, I'll just pause for a moment and let you ask. If not, we'll have another opportunity to do that at the end of the call as well.
Anyone?
All right, I'll move along. All right, so I mentioned that global printer manufacturer that we kind of deployed this into. And I'm going to start moving just a little quickly. I want to be sensitive to everyone's time. The real big thing here is we have a report that we run, and you can see kind of where their MTTRs were. They were sitting at like 90 minutes or something overall average before they implemented IntelliService. And then after they implemented IntelliService, there's just a huge drop in the MTTR number. And I think it comes down to like 30-something minutes, which is just crazy, as well as significant agent productivity improvements, reduction in handling time. So that's really kind of the big takeaway from this slide, is that by implementing that, we actually, because we were the MSP in this case, we significantly helped ourselves, quite honestly, but we made the customer very, very happy as well. And this is where a lot of, I would say probably 60 or so % of the initial features that were in the product were born from servicing this partner and this customer. And then a lot of the stuff that was added after that was after we started productizing it and incorporating customers' feedback back into the product. We are an evergreen product, by the way. We do have quarterly releases. So it is very much SaaS feeling, and from that perspective. But it's structured a little bit differently in terms of pricing. It's not necessarily price per head, and I'll go over that in a second. So again, I mentioned that we deployed this in FinTech. You can go through, and I'm not going to go through and read all of the bullets for you. It's a little bit of a wall of text, but a couple things to point out here. We did Slack integration for this one, which is again in core in our wheelhouse, as well as Teams and any other chat channel. And the big thing here is we auto deflected over 150 service requests per month. Which doesn't sound like a lot, but the volume in this was for that particular type of request was low. So it was a pretty high percentage already. And then in terms of pure minutes, 15 to 20 minute reduction in average ticket handling time was pretty huge as well, considering it started at about an hour. And then finally, global digital media streamer type of customer that we deployed at. Again, you see the same type of metrics here: improvement in agent productivity. This one is 28%. And then the cost savings due to unified information. So that's 20% cost savings. I mentioned $62 a ticket, so $12, so dropped down to around $50 a ticket. So that's a pretty significant impact right off the bat. So that's kind of nice. And with this one, we did a couple of customizations that really kind of catered to some of the VIP customers as well, which was greatly appreciated. So how we kind of engage is through what we call an IVA, or an IntelliService value assessment. And basically what this is we go through and we take about 6 months worth of your data, ticketing data, we ingest it into our system, we process it, we come back out with your top ticket types and requests. Hopefully we show you some insights that you might not already know. But more importantly, we come back and say, okay, based on these are the ones that we can address in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months in terms of use cases, and how much we feel of a deflection or savings that you would see, and we present that back to you as an overall percentage of efficiency improvement. Okay, so those numbers typically will come out of the gate at around 10 to 15%, sometimes north of 15, almost 20%, just to start with. But the overall goal is to get them to those numbers that I just showed you in the previous slides, where we're pushing 30 and over 30% in terms of efficiency gain. And that's you can tie that directly back to that ticket cost. So I mentioned what we ask is about 6 months worth of ticket data, any kind of other KPIs that you might have, like CSAT scores and things like that, so we can see can we flatten some of those peaks a little bit for you, the number of agents you have, things like that, and of course that loaded cost per ticket, because that's what we're trying to ultimately positively affect. And we're going to go back and provide those analytics and the impacts, the cost assessment, and basically the overall model. And so this is kind of an example of the report that you might get out of the gate, kind of your state of services today. And then 3, 6, 9 months, you would start to see this, where you can see what was deflected, you can see the agent time dropping and what was saved, and where it was deployed, and after it deployed, it dropping. And this is kind of the example that I was talking about earlier, where you can see those metrics just get better and better right after the implementation of the product. So we actually go through and provide this to you. We're very, very transparent about how we operate, and about what kind of positive effect that we're having. We have a calculator, and this kind of really just goes to what we call our value-based pricing. And our value-based pricing basically says, and I'm just gonna cut to the chase in a nutshell. So if you are spending a certain amount on a ticket, and we're going to come in and we're going to say we're going to save you 10% or 15% or 20%, whatever that is, we hit that number, and then you save $1 and we take a quarter or 30 cents or 20 cents or whatever the pricing ends up being. So we don't make any money unless you're saving money. And so if everybody told me, hey, I'm going to hand you $1, if it's okay that every time I hand you that $1, I'm going to take a quarter of it, I'd say as long as you keep that flowing, we're good. So that's really kind of the angle that we're coming at this from. We feel like customers spend way too much on AI upfront with the hope of some sort of ROI a year out, 2 years out. And to be honest with you guys, a lot of the customers just aren't seeing that. They aren't, because it's poorly implemented, because it requires a lot of training of the bot, which our product does not. There's a lot of hidden things that go into that. that you don't see. And by the time you're all said and done, the savings are kind of flatlined and the ROI is not realized. So what we're basically saying is that we're putting our ROI, or our money where our mouth is, so to speak, up front, and you're going to see ROI from day one. And that's how we get paid. So I just kind of want to let that sink in as we go through and talk about the last slide here. So we're looking at about 3 days to do the IVA that I mentioned. About, if you guys decide to pull the trigger, and I know there's a lot of things that go on in legals and non-disclosure agreements and all these things, but this is how fast we can move, and we have before. 3 days to do the IVA, a week to start and kick off the implementation, and a month to actually implement, and you guys to start to see value and start to hit those efficiency levels that we predict in the IVA right out of the gate. So it's pretty fast and furious. Obviously, there's some investment from your perspective in terms of some time in the implementation, but we provide a customer service management with every deal, so you do get that kind of white glove treatment and that one throat to choke, so to speak, in terms of supporting the product and supporting everything and helping you out with new features, helping your staff better use the product. All right, so that basically concludes things. It was a pretty fast half hour. I ended almost on the dot, about 1 minute over, but I am more than happy to stick around